Deborah, I'm scared, whispered Candy, slightly propping herself up on her elbow. What are you afraid of? The worst thing that could happen is that we'll rot in this house under our father's pressure, her sister said, sitting up in bed. I don't want to spend my whole life studying lab mice and making new medications. Dad doesn't seem to get that just because he's a born chemist and a researcher to the core, it doesn't mean his daughters have to follow in his footsteps, as he insists. And I don't want to follow in his footsteps. I want to do sports. I want to become at least a fitness trainer, not shuffle test tubes in Dad's lab and write stuff in a special journal. Okay, Debbie, don't get upset. I understand. I don't want to be stuck in that lab forever either. But what if it doesn't work out for us? Did Oliver really talk to his aunt? I've told you 100 times. He talked to her. She agreed. It's just, you're Oliver's girlfriend, and I'm just your sister. How are we going to live there? In that little seaside town? Candy, are you sure you want to run away with me? These doubts of yours, these fears, you just need to believe in the best, that's all. We'll just go, start working. What about our studies? Are we not going to study? But we've already sent out our applications. We'll have to wait with studying, we need to settle in and save some money first. We're leaving this town, sis, so forget about the capital universities. If Mom were alive, she would definitely say we're crazy. Maybe if she had left Dad in time, she could have been happy and not gotten cancer. Deborah sighed sadly and pulled her knees to her chin. Debbie, but Dad's not bad, Candy said softly. He loves us and wants the best for us. Candy, I'm not saying that Dad is a tyrant and a bad person, but his tendency to suppress everything and impose his will it just makes it hard to breathe. You know that yourself, don't you? Yes, you're right. We need to try to break free from his influence and live our own lives, not dictated by anyone else. Finally, at least one sensible thought this evening. Now let's sleep. We have a lot to do tomorrow. The girls' room fell silent. Both were awake, each thinking about her own concerns. A nearly full moon peeked through the window, as if eavesdropping on the girls' conversations, watching them and trying to say something. But what? Maybe that they were right and should run away from their parental home, or perhaps to warn them not to do it, to stay and submit to their father's will and live calmly, without any adventures. Deborah was the older sister. She was born 5 minutes earlier than Candy. The girls were twins, but fraternal. Outwardly, the sisters were completely different from each other. Deborah had dark hair, brown eyes, and well-defined lips, while her sister was born blonde with light blue eyes and delicate lips. Perhaps their noses were similar, straight with a barely noticeable bump. Deborah grew up brave and rebellious. She was always fighting with boys, defending herself and her younger sister. She always emphasized that Candy was her little sister, as if there were several years between them, not just a few minutes. Candy took after their mother, quiet and indecisive, but very caring and sensitive. She could sit on the balcony for hours, drawing something in her green sketchbook. To be honest, her drawings were amazing. Their father did not approve, calling it all nonsense, just a hobby that wouldn't bring anything but extra expenses for materials. Candy dreamed of studying in an art university and becoming a real artist. Deborah was not concerned about her education at all. She just wanted some active job related to sports or travel. She never mentioned her desire to her father, knowing what would follow. The sisters had been planning their escape since the Christmas holidays. And then Oliver Haig, their classmate and Deborah's boyfriend, said he was planning to go to his aunt's place. She promised to help arrange a job for him. The guy wasn't ready to delve into studies, at least not yet. His parents were happy that he was going to a seaside town. Maybe there would be fewer temptations, and their son wouldn't get into any trouble. Oliver was a good guy, but he was always restless, never knowing what he wanted. When he and Deborah started dating, he at least realized he wanted to be with her, to build a family with her, so he talked to Aunt Terry to help arrange a job. She was a single woman, disillusioned with men. Her life was empty and uninteresting, so she gladly agreed that her nephew, her brother's son, would live with her. She didn't even protest that he would bring 2 girls with him. Aunt Terry was not a prude and approached everything with interest, not judgment. Moreover, providing a couple of rooms in her attic house for the young people was no problem for her. Train tickets were already bought, necessary things packed. They decided to run away at night when their father would be asleep and couldn't control them with his calls, wouldn't raise the alarm that his daughters were nowhere to be found. The girls planned to tell him everything later, once they were already there. "Debbie, babe, are you ready?" Oliver spoke quickly, even slightly excited. "Yes, the bags are already hidden by the front door. We meet at 11, right?" "But what? Is something wrong?" Oliver asked worriedly. "It's Candy. She has a bad headache and it'll pass as soon as we get on the train. It'll be fine. Maybe. She'll take some aspirin and everything will be okay." But Candy was only getting worse. She had a fever and a severe stomachache. "Candy, you're very pale. Can you stand up?" "No, I can't even move." She curled up on the bed. "That's it, I'm calling an ambulance." Deborah decisively took the phone. "No, Debbie, what about our escape?" "What escape?" "You need to go to the hospital. It might be something serious." "Suspected appendicitis," said the ambulance doctor, a pleasant woman with glasses and neatly tied up hair. "We need to go to the hospital, urgently." "Debbie, you'll leave with Oliver, right?" Her sister winced in pain. "No, what are you talking about? I'll stay home. We'll figure something out later." Candy was taken away, and Deborah stayed home alone. Their father hadn't returned from his friend's place yet. The girl was confused. She didn't want to leave her sister, but she was scared to stay home. Her father would start pressuring her about getting into medical school, nagging her to study. The mere thought of cramming chemistry made Debbie's jaw clench. She had passed the college entrance exam, but her father still wouldn't leave her alone, insisting she review the material so she could excel in September. "Ollie, I don't know what to do," Deborah sobbed. "Debbie, what's wrong?" "Candy was taken to the hospital with suspected appendicitis, and I'll have to stay home." "Are you crazy? We've planned everything so well. We'll go together, and then we'll figure it out. If you stay, your father will lock you up and never let you out. Do you want to spend the rest of your life studying mice and mixing chemicals?" The boy ranted indignantly. "Ollie, but I can't leave my sister, especially in this condition. She has no one besides me and our father." "Debbie, your dad will take care of Candy. You'll have time to tell him about your sister. There's plenty of time until 11, baby. Come on, don't overthink it. Everything will be fine." "Okay, I've got to run. We'll meet at the gas station at 11. "Okay, Ollie, I'll call if anything." "No if anything, Debbie, cut it out." Oliver hung up. The moment he did, Deborah heard her father return. "Dad, Candy was taken to the hospital." "Don't worry, it's appendicitis." "When did this happen?" Her father looked alarmed. "Here's the clinic's number where she was taken." The girl handed her father a piece of paper torn from a notebook. "Keep it with you. We'll visit her tomorrow." "All right, I'll leave it here." In the kitchen cabinet, Deborah's heart sank. In a few hours, she would be on a train, leaving her hometown and her family home behind. Deborah sat on her bed, looking at the few family photographs. Tears burned her eyes, and she felt like she couldn't breathe. A green, sticky sadness had settled inside her, constricting her heart and leaving a nasty chill. Why can't we all just be happy? Each in our own way happy. Dad is happy with his lab and new research. And that's wonderful. He helps sick people get better and gives hope for curing serious diseases. Why can't Candy find happiness doing what she loves, creating beauty for herself and others? She loves sketching and painting with watercolors. Why can't I just become a fitness trainer and work in some sports club? Why? Deborah quietly voiced all this aloud, unable to keep her thoughts inside her head. She didn't want to leave her sister, especially now when she was in the hospital and needed her care. But Ollie was right, it was now or never. There wouldn't be another chance to escape. She took a few photos and tucked them into her bag. Exactly at 11, Deborah stood near the gas station with a small bag over her shoulder. She decided to take only the essentials. She wouldn't need much in a seaside town where it was always warm. "Hi, Debbie, baby. I'm so glad you came." The boy hugged her and kissed her temple. "Shall we go?" "Let's go," Deborah replied sadly. "I feel like the worst person. By the way, you should change your number. As soon as we get to my aunt's, we'll buy you a new SIM card. Your dad will definitely hound you with calls. And Candy? You can secretly call or text her." "No problem. Let's hurry, we need to make it to the station on time, our train leaves at midnight." And so, Oliver and Deborah stepped into a new life away from the noisy, never-sleeping capital and their relatives. In this southern seaside town lived Ollie's only close family member, Aunt Teresa, whom everyone in the family called Terry. She had a small house with an extension. There were 3 rooms that she rented to tourists. This was her main source of income. Aunt Terry also made various suites at home. These suites quickly gained popularity among both locals and tourists. She had no children, and her husband had long left her and this town. She was glad to see her nephew, whom she hadn't seen in several years. Ollie used to spend every summer vacation with Aunt Terry. "Hello, my dears," the smiling woman greeted them, watering the flowers by her gate. "Auntie." Oliver smiled and opened his arms for a hug. "It's been so long since I was here. 3 years without a visit." Aunt Terry hugged him tightly. "This is Deborah, my girlfriend," the boy nodded towards Debbie. "Very nice to meet you, Deborah. Where's your sister?" She got sick, so she had to cancel the trip." "Nice to meet you too, Aunt Terry. Come in, I'll feed you breakfast and show you your room. It's small but cozy, you'll see. I prepared 2 rooms, thought there'd be 3 of you." Oliver started working as a butcher at the local market. The job was hard, but it paid well. Deborah hadn't found a job yet, so she helped Aunt Terry with the tourists and making sweets. She still hoped to find any job and start saving for her studies. At the end of summer, she found out she was pregnant. She was scared of how Oliver and Aunt Terry would react to the news. "Sweetie, you don't seem yourself," Aunt Terry said suddenly while they were making homemade jelly. "Are you feeling okay?" "Aunt Terry, Deborah put down the spoon she was using to stir the gelatin mixture. "I don't know how it happened, but I'm pregnant." She covered her face with her hands. "Debbie, baby, you're so young," Aunt Terry sighed. "But God knows when to give a baby, so it's best not to argue with him. Have you told Ollie yet?" "No, I didn't know how he'd react. We planned something completely different. I wanted to find a job and study to become a fitness trainer or maybe something else. It's okay, I'll help as much as I can, and Oliver earns well. We'll manage. And now, with your help, the sweets business is going twice as fast. You helped me so much. We'll make it work." The woman smiled warmly at Deborah and hugged her. Debbie missed her mother, her warmth, and care. Now, Aunt Terry had become a mother figure to her, treating her like the daughter she never had. Everything could have been great if not for the tragedy that struck Oliver. One day he felt unwell but didn't go to the doctor right away. By the time he was taken by ambulance, he had fallen into a coma and never woke up. It was a tick bite, as the doctors found out. This happened before Lana was born. The girl was born at the very end of spring. Deborah and Oliver never got married. His parents were not going to help Deborah and her child. They blamed the girl for everything, claiming that if it weren't for her, Oliver would never have left home and this misfortune would not have happened, even though they themselves supported the trip before. "Don't worry, Debbie," her Aunt Terry reassured her. They have always been like this, even when Ollie was little. They always tried to blame everyone for their failures, including me. We will manage, I am sure of it. Everything will be fine. Thank you, Aunt Terry. I would be lost without you, the girl replied gratefully. Her sister stopped answering calls and messages and eventually changed her number. Initially, this greatly distressed Deborah, but later, when her Ollie died and then her daughter was born, she no longer had time for it. She tried to shake off the guilt and live her life. After all, it was Candy who broke off communication, not her. Deborah had to bury her dream of becoming a fitness trainer. She needed to survive, not study. When little Lana grew up a bit, Deborah found a job. 3 times a week, she cleaned and cooked for a wealthy family. The pay was good, and the hours were few. The rest of the time, Deborah helped Aunt Terry, as before. With Debbie's arrival, her aunt had even more boarders. Whether this was connected to her or not, her aunt said that the girl brought her luck and loved her as if she were her own daughter. Deborah also grew very fond of Aunt Teresa, a kind and wise woman with a sensitive heart and eyes full of some kind of otherworldly light. Lana grew up as a mischievous but very thoughtful girl. This reminded Deborah of Candy. When Deborah saw her daughter with a pencil in hand, she realized that she had inherited her aunt's genes. Candy's love for drawing, in turn, came from their late mother. Lana drew whenever she could. She would start with a blank sheet of paper, and within minutes, there would be a whole world, birds, animals, forest huts, and incredibly beautiful flowers and trees. At school, the girl was immediately noticed, called talented, and recommended to join an art club. Deborah couldn't hold back her tears when she watched her daughter carefully drawing lines on the paper. Her younger sister Candy used to sit the same way in a wicker chair on the balcony, spending hours bringing new images to life with her pencil. At those moments, Deborah felt pain. She missed Candy, her gentle smile, and her tender touch so much. Her sweet Candy, as Debbie called her sister, was now so far away, not only physically. After all, Candy had cut her out of her life. Deborah understood her sister. She was too hurt, probably saw her as a traitor and hated her for it. The young woman hoped that one day she would be able to talk to her sister and ask for forgiveness. Deborah often thought about her father too. Despite everything, he was her real father, who loved her in his way and wanted the best for his daughters. He was just too conservative, with a rigid mind, as they say. He couldn't understand that his daughters would be much better off choosing their own paths rather than following in his footsteps. Candy was very angry at her sister. She had abandoned her at the most difficult moment. The girl spent 2 weeks in a hospital bed. Her father was furious that Deborah had dared to disobey and run away from home. He threatened to cut her out of his will and kept saying that he now had only one daughter, Candy. Candy didn't get into medical university. Her scores weren't high enough. Even her father's connections didn't help. But he didn't give up. He put her in college so she could at least become a nurse and then decide if she could become a doctor or not. Candy was even more angry at her sister when she sat over the hated textbooks, trying to learn complex terms and solve problems in chemistry and genetics. And her father tutored her additionally. At those moments, she wanted to scream from frustration and cry, cursing her fate, her weakness, and her inability to stand up to her father. Secretly from Mr. Laird, Candy found herself a teacher who taught her drawing and watercolor painting. "You are talented, Candy. Why didn't you apply to an art university?" "Oh, Mr. Clark," she sighed, "my father, he thinks it's foolishness and a waste of time and money. So now I am studying at a medical college. I will be a nurse." "Don't worry, your father will regret his words when he sees your paintings in world-famous museums. Believe me, you are capable of this. You have a great talent." Candy found it easier to endure the hated studies in college because, in her free time, she could sketch and paint her first watercolors. Naturally, she did all this in secret from her father. She saved her pocket money, skimped on everything, and paid for lessons with Mr. Clark. She spent money on paints, brushes, pencils, and paper. After graduating, she started working in her father's laboratory as an assistant. She couldn't manage more. Mr. Laird was angry that his daughter had not inherited his research mind and passion for science. But he had no choice but to accept the situation. Candy never got married. She had given up on relationships with men. One unhappy love was enough for her. Candy decided she would no longer waste time on romantic affairs that also caused so much pain. She poured all her unspent love onto paper in the form of landscapes and portraits, and sometimes she drew funny pictures. Candy didn't try to make a name for herself anywhere, although Mr. Clark told her it was high time. She lacked the spirit, which was already weakened and further undermined by her sister's betrayal. One day, when Candy was on vacation, she met a blogger girl on social media who called herself an art critic and illustrator. She had a huge audience interested in art. Pamela invited Candy to visit her, to get to know each other better and possibly start some joint venture. Her paintings delighted Pamela. Candy did not refuse. Only the name of the town where Pamela invited her was painfully familiar. At first, Candy couldn't remember where she had heard it, but then she realized it was where her sister Deborah had gone with her boyfriend. She wondered if she was still there or had long since moved somewhere else. Candy knew nothing about her sister. She didn't want to know. She had cut her out of her life and still couldn't forgive her. Candy arrived at the appointed meeting place much earlier, miscalculating the time. She decided not to sit on the bench but to walk along the paths. The park was small. What kind of park can there be in a small town? But it was literally immersed in greenery, making the air very fragrant and fresh. Candy wandered along one of the paths and suddenly noticed a girl of about 12. She was sitting on a bench, and next to her, some pictures in simple frames were propped up against the back of the bench. "Would you like to choose a drawing for yourself?" she suddenly asked. "I don't charge much." "Do you draw them yourself?" the stranger asked with interest, coming closer. "Yes, I do. If you buy at least one drawing from me, it will be a small step towards success." "Success? Are you preparing for a competition?" Candy was looking at the girl's work with interest. Each was interesting in its own way. The girl clearly had great talent. "No, competitions are nonsense. I really need money right now to help my mom get out of prison. She is not guilty of anything. That evil woman planted her own jewelry on her. The rich always have more opportunities. So she got my mom put in jail." Tears were ready to well up in her eyes. "Oh, how sad and unfair." Candy looked at the girl. She seemed very smart and thoughtful for her age. "I'll buy something from you." "Oh my. What a portrait. Some scientist, right?" Candy looked at the artwork more closely. The face was painfully familiar. "No, it can't be. This is her father. This is a portrait of my grandfather," the girl began to explain. "But I've never seen him. Only in a photograph that my mother keeps. Do you want to buy it? It's done in pencil. Sometimes I try painting with watercolor, but I'm not very good at it yet." "Yes, I suppose I'll buy it." The woman took out a few banknotes from her wallet. "Wow. Choose more, because this is too much for one drawing." "No, thank you. It's very beautiful. What's your name?" "Lana," the girl smiled. Where had Candy seen that smile before? Where? She remembered. Her mother smiled like that. She barely remembered her, but she could never forget that smile. "And your mother?" What's her name?" "Deborah." "Isn't it a beautiful name?" "Yes, very beautiful." "And your father's name is Oliver?" "Oliver Haig?" "How do you know?" "Though, my dad died before I was born. Mom said he was bitten by an infected tick. They didn't even get a chance to marry," the girl sighed sadly. "Lana, and who do you live with now, if your mom?" "With Grandma Terry. She's also very worried about Mom. She gathered all her savings, but it's still not enough for a good lawyer." "It's okay. I'll sell all my drawings, then it will be enough." Or not. Can you give me your grandmother's phone number? I need to talk to her. I'll try to help your mom get out of jail. Yes, write it down, I remember it by heart. And Lana recited Grandma Terry's number. See you, Lana. Candy hurried away. Goodbye. Lana packed her frames into a bag and headed home. There was nothing more to catch in the park today. She couldn't believe it. Meeting her own niece in the park and learning this. Candy hurriedly canceled her meeting with Pamela, apologizing several times. Pamela asked her to call or text as soon as Candy had a chance to meet. Then Candy dialed Aunt Teresa's number. She told her everything she knew. Deborah was accused of harming someone and stealing a valuable piece of jewelry. Nonsense. Debbie had always been reckless, but not a thief, and she certainly wouldn't just hit or push someone. Candy checked into a hotel. There were few tourists, it was off-season, so the town lived its quiet life. Candy got a room with a sea view, and it was spacious and bright. The young woman changed and immediately called Mr. Rogers, a family friend and a very good lawyer. "Hello, Candy," came the cheerful voice on the other end. "Hello, Mr. Rogers. I really need your help. Actually, it's not for me, but for Deborah. Just don't tell my father, please." Debbie got into a very bad situation. The young woman told him everything she knew. Mr. Rogers listened carefully and said, "Candy, I'm very busy right now, but I'll recommend a very good lawyer to you, my protege. He's really good, he's won several cases already. I'll be on standby. If you need anything, call me. I'll send you his contact information now." "Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I really hope for your protege." Mr. Carroll turned out to be a very pleasant young man in his early 30s. He arrived the next day, and they went together to visit Debbie and handle the formalities of appointing him as Deborah Laird's lawyer. Candy was allowed to talk to her sister for a bit. Deborah came in and looked at her sister for a long time without speaking, then her lips quivered and tears sprang from her eyes. "My sweet Candy," she almost whispered, "is it really you?" "Yes, Debbie, it's me. I'll do everything to prove your innocence and get you out of here. I've already talked to the lawyer. Mr. Carroll seemed very good to me, and he seems quite professional." "Yes, Debbie, he's Mr. Rogers' protege." "Candy, how are you? How's Dad? How did you find out about everything? God, I've missed you all these years, not a minute went by without thinking of you. Forgive me, I really didn't want to leave you then. But I was afraid I wouldn't be able to escape later." "I'm sorry, sister," Deborah lowered her eyes. "Stop it, that's all in the past. I admit, I was furious with you, even changed my number, blocked you everywhere. But I missed you too. Your daughter has grown up so wonderfully." Candy couldn't hold back her tears either. "You saw Lana?" "Where?" "Long story. We'll talk later when you're free. It will happen soon, believe me. Candy, Lana always reminded me of you, she still does. She's as passionate about drawing as you, she never puts the pencil down." Deborah smiled through her tears. "Yes, I bought a portrait of our father from her. It's amazing. She's so talented." "What?" "I don't understand, Candy. And you don't need to understand. We'll discuss it later. We'll have plenty of time to chat." It only took 2 sessions for Mr. Carroll to prove Deborah Laird's innocence. Moreover, she was to receive a large sum as compensation for moral damages. Deborah had been working for the Barnes family for several years. She came to their house 3 times a week to clean and cook. Everything was fine, the owners were almost never at home. Mrs. Barnes had her own business, she owned a nightclub in the town center. Mr. Barnes essentially did nothing except sports and lived off his wife. That day, Deborah was cleaning the Barnes house as usual, completely alone, when the master of the house suddenly came home. He was quite drunk. "Aren't you tired of scrubbing this dirt?" he asked sweetly. "It's my job, Mr. Barnes," Deborah replied calmly and continued dusting. "But you could have so much more if you were friends with me." "I think we get along really well," the man said, running his finger along her neck. "No, Mr. Barnes," Deborah said, stepping back. "Come on. Don't play hard to get. Be nicer, and I won't forget it. My wife has plenty of money. I can share some with you. I'm sure you could use it." "Mr. Barnes, you're talking to the wrong person. I'm a maid, not a woman of easy virtue." "Why are you acting like a princess?" he said, grabbing her forcefully and pulling her close. The strong smell of alcohol hit her nose. Deborah tried to break free, but his hands were like iron. He threw her onto the sofa. Deborah didn't know what to do. Then she saw a glass figurine on a small table nearby. She grabbed it and struck him on the head. At that moment, Mrs. Barnes entered the house. She started yelling at Deborah, accusing her of seducing her husband, then left the living room and called the police. During the search, a very expensive piece of Mrs. Barnes' jewelry was found on Deborah. Mrs. Barnes had always been jealous of her husband with every woman. She was also afraid he might spill secrets to someone. She was not conducting her business entirely honestly. This came out in court when Deborah's case was being examined. It turned out that Mrs. Barnes was involved in smuggling alcohol and tobacco products. She had dug her own grave by reporting her maid, apparently hoping to teach her a lesson, although it was still unclear why she planted her jewelry in Deborah's bag. Maybe she feared Deborah had learned something about her illegal activities at the club and decided to put the girl behind bars. In the end, Mrs. Barnes was fined so heavily that she would probably have to sell her business. Additionally, she was ordered to pay Deborah a substantial amount as compensation for moral damages. "Oh my God, I'm free!" Deborah exclaimed, spreading her arms to the wind as they left the courthouse. "We need to celebrate," Candy said cheerfully. "Exactly," agreed Mr. Carroll, who asked the sisters to call him Tom. "I already called Aunt Terry. She and Lana are preparing a festive dinner." Candy looked so happy. Deborah thought it was not just about her release, but also the handsome young lawyer. Her sister deserved true happiness. All the way home, Deborah thought about their father. Had he really erased her from his life forever? How foolish everything had turned out. Deborah ran away from home, going against her father's wishes, betraying her sister. And what was the result? She lost her beloved, gave birth to a daughter, and became a cleaner and cook. Yes, she didn't spend her life studying lab mice, but she didn't become a fitness trainer either, although she dreamed of it. Only her daughter brought her joy and made her truly happy. In everything else, Deborah considered herself an absolute failure. Robert Laird sat in his small office, looking at photos of his daughters from graduation. Deborah looked so happy, hugging her sister. She had the same eyes as him and the same direct gaze. Candy was completely different, taking after her mother. Penny. He had lost his wife many years ago. The illness consumed her in just a year. He remembered her words almost before her death. "Maybe if I had decided to leave you, Rob, I would have lived much longer. You always wanted me to live your way. You laughed at my love for photography. You thought my main task was to be a good wife and mother to our girls. I think you don't even know what you want." She died, but she never forgave him. Was he really so categorical and firm? Did he impose his rules on his wife, depriving her of a voice? For some reason, many years ago, Robert didn't give much importance to all this. He had to take care of his daughters, solve many problems that his wife used to handle. But now he had time to think about the past and present. Deborah ran away from home, left everything, and ignored the fact that she would be disinherited. She never once showed up or asked for help over the years. What had become of her? Where was she now, his rebellious Deborah? Poor Candy. She had it hardest in this family. Her father controlled her every step. He forced her to study at a medical college. He saw that the girl had no talent or desire for it. Essentially, he forced his daughter to do something she hated. Like her mother, she simply couldn't oppose him, obeyed, and lived by his rules. Was she happy? Her father never thought about it. He wanted to help people, to create new medicines to fight serious diseases, but he didn't think about his girls, didn't help them find happiness, to succeed in what they were inclined to. Robert thought that sports, which Deborah was so passionate about, were not suitable for a girl from a respectable family, and smearing paper with paint and drawing something with a pencil was nonsense, a frivolous activity not worth spending time and effort on. How Robert Laird regretted this now that he was over 60. Would he never tell his daughters about it? After all, he hadn't managed to tell his wife. All Robert could do was visit her grave and ask for forgiveness there. But his daughters were still here, they could still be happy. Why did he accumulate this fortune? Why? For whom? Wouldn't it be better to put it to use? Spend every last penny to make his now grown-up daughters happy, to fulfill their dreams? That night, Robert Laird barely closed his eyes, and in the morning he called Candy, who, for the first time in years, had gone on vacation without much explanation. He couldn't even imagine what his daughter would tell him. That's when he definitely decided to radically change his life and the lives of his girls. Mom, Mommy. Lana ran down the porch and rushed to her mother. Lana, darling. My fluffy bunny. Deborah caught her daughter in her arms, even though she was no longer a little girl. I missed you so much. It's so good that everything ended so wonderfully, Aunt Terry hugged Debbie. Aunt Terry, thank you. The young woman kissed her aunt on the top of her head and hugged her. You shouldn't thank me, but your sister. She is so wonderful. Why didn't you communicate for so long? It's a long story, Aunt Terry, a very long, sad one, but let's not talk about it now. Now we will have fun. Did you make my favorite sesame cookies? Of course, baby. Lana and I baked a whole mountain of them. We'll sell the leftovers, Lana giggled. There won't be any leftovers, Tom also hugged Aunt Terry. I'll personally eat every last crumb. No way. Candy laughed softly and also hugged Lana and Aunt Terry. You know, sweetheart, I feel uneasy that Dad is, how to say it, alone now. I'd like us all to be together. I often thought about him. About what would have happened if I hadn't run away with Ollie to this seaside town back then. Don't worry, Debbie. You'll still have a chance to talk to Mr. Dad about everything. Remember how we used to call him that when we were kids? Yeah, exactly. He was always bossing us around, nitpicking. I know now that it was his way of showing care and love, but back then, I was so angry, ready to tear everything apart. Remember, I drew a mustache on the portrait of some scientist hanging in his office? Oh, what a scandal that was, Candy laughed, almost dropping the fruit dish from her hands. I couldn't wash off the mustache he drew on my face as punishment for several days. That was something else. A table with a sun umbrella was set up right in the yard. Everyone had already filled their glasses and were ready to make the first toast when a car drove up. First, a bunch of balloons flew out, and then a man with light blonde hair, slightly touched with gray, appeared. Dad, Deborah almost dropped her glass. How? The young woman jumped up from the table and ran to the low gate. She opened it with one swift motion. Debbie, her father struggled with the balloons. Hello, my girl. Lana jumped up and took the balloons from her grandfather. She recognized him right away. He hadn't changed much, almost the same as in the photo she had drawn him from. Deborah stood still for a moment, then threw herself at her father's neck. Dad, I thought I would never see you again. I thought you hated me forever. She buried her face in his strong, reliable shoulder. What are you talking about, sweetie? Of course, I was angry, broke more than one cup, Candy can confirm. Forgive me, baby. I'm so sorry for what I did to you, to Candy, and to your mom. Well, who remembers the old? Let's go to the table. Everyone bustled to get Mr. Laird seated. They moved chairs, someone ran for another plate, someone brought a chair. How did you, my daughter, end up behind bars? Robert asked when everyone finally settled in their places. Oh, Dad, I didn't finish off one jerk, and he started crying, Deborah laughed, serving Lana some salad. You really are something. I taught you, finish them off right away, her father laughed, and everyone else joined in. You know, I propose a toast to Pamela, Candy suddenly said. Sweetheart, don't tell me that's your girlfriend, Debbie giggled. Oh, stop it, her sister wrinkled her nose. Pamela is an art critic, illustrator, and blogger. She found me on social media and invited me over. So I came. That's where we met with my niece in the park. What does she care about you, Candy? Her father was surprised. She liked my watercolors, Dad. I secretly learned to paint. Spent all my pocket money on it. I'm sorry. Oh my God, my girls, forgive me if you can. I was such an idiot. I imposed my interests on you, and you. It was clear that Robert Laird found it hard to speak, and everyone understood that his words were 100% sincere. Thank you, my boy, he turned to Tom. Glad to help, Mr. Laird. You have wonderful daughters. Especially Candy, Debbie giggled. Candy blushed slightly. It's so good that everything ended well, Aunt Terry said with a smile. Oh no, it's just beginning. Robert smiled back at her. Thank you for everything. Don't mention it. Debbie became like a real daughter to me, and Lana like a granddaughter. It's so good that the closest people finally forgot their grudges and left all the unsaid things in the past. It's so nice here, not like in the capital. No peace day or night, everything buzzes, everyone is in a hurry. But here it's paradise, quiet, green, and the sea. I can't even imagine living in a big city now. Deborah poured herself some juice. So you're not planning to return? Her father squinted slyly. No, Daddy. The only thing I want is to study to become a dietitian. Really? Candy looked at her sister with her big light blue eyes. You dreamed of being a fitness trainer. What kind of trainer am I now? I'm almost 31. An old lady, her father smiled. If you want to, then be a dietitian. You do have a knack for medicine, daughter. Yes, as it turned out. And I have news too. Candy exclaimed cheerfully. Pamela started promoting my paintings. Several of them have already been sold. And they paid a good price. And this is just the beginning. Sweetheart, you are amazing. Deborah clapped her hands. You pulled off the deal with the training so cleverly. Dad didn't suspect a thing. I've already realized everything, Robert Laird said sadly. You can bite me for everything I did wrong. Oh, come on. Everyone has already made up. Lana raised her glass of juice. I propose a toast to friendship and love. Hurrah, everyone shouted in unison. To friendship and love. Every person has their own happiness. To get along well with each other and not quarrel, we need to simply accept this happiness of another person, accept and share it, rather than imposing our own. That is when our world will become much purer and much more harmonious. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.